according to Forbes magazine, it was just released about a few weeks ago. They rated the most powerfulest woman in the world. Michelle Obama came in at #1. So Michelle Obama has a lot of sway with the people. You understand? What she did when she came back from Spain is she said that Moorish Spain is unforgettable and is somewhere that our people need to begin to visit. She was being attacked by the GOP, people like Rush Limbaugh, Newt Gingrich, and all of the other all of these other crusaders is what I like to call them, because we're going to show and prove that we are currently in a current day crusades. And we're going to explain what the crusades was and how it affected our people and how it affected us to today. You dig what I'm saying? So she got attacked by all of these right-wingers and whatnot. They said that she was using the taxpayers' money when she's the wife of the president. Like, she should be able to do whatever she wants to do. She should be able to go on a space shuttle and visit the space station if she wants to. That's the first lady. But they began beating her up. A lot of people in the public did not know why they were beating her up and what was the whole fervor behind them attacking her. I'm going to show in a clip her visiting Spain and what that means. Also, what we began seeing is something that they call the Cordoba Mosque debate. Now, those people in the news cycle know how to spin the story. They never will tell you the Cordoba Mosque. When you begin to research it and dig into it, you will understand that the mosque at Ground Zero initially was named the Cordoba Mosque. Okay? The Cordoba Mosque is basically lending its name from Cordoba, Spain. Cordoba, Spain was one of the Moorish provinces in ancient Moorish and medieval Spain and whatnot that the Moors were renowned. This was a city that the Moors were renowned for building, and it was recaptured by the Christians during the Reconquista. So by them saying that they were building a mosque at Ground Zero and naming it the Cordoba Mosque, it raised all kind of alarms amongst individuals who know who we are when we don't know who we are. Because what they do in these lodges, what they do in these Oxford, what they do in these Ivy League colleges, what they do in all of these behind the scenes, we like to call it, is they study our history and they study the story of us in ways that we don't study because we're not privy to a lot of this information. So what me and Brother Cheyenne has decided to do in this 8-week course is to basically dig up the grave of all of this buried information. I like to call it buried treasure because information is treasures. Knowledge is power. When you begin to empower yourself with this information will basically empower you and help you with your everyday mission to basically solve problems that we have. Because I used to walk around for years confused about who I was. I had all kind of pieces missing in my head. It was like a piece of puzzle that was not completely put together because the pieces that I thought that I was getting that was going to help me put the pieces together were not the pieces, they were not the proper pieces. So my perception of who I was and who my people was and my history was thwarted. It was incomplete. So a lot of things go on, a lot of paradigms, get presented to you, and you don't know how to basically, take it in because you don't have a complete understanding of what it truly is. I went through about 8 to 10 years with the whole Illuminati thing. You know what I'm saying? The whole Masonic Illuminati spell where everything was the Masons, everything was Illuminati, scared to death of everything illuminated, you know what I mean? Not really knowing what that truly was until I began greater studying to understand that these people are mimicking us. The information that they got in their lodges, why it's so secretive, is because it's your information. And they won't let you in until they perform all kind of rituals and you take all kind of oaths to promise that you won't go back to your people and tell them what you saw. The reason why when they reach 33 degrees, they put their hands on the Quran and swear to Allah and things of that nature has a history to it. You dig what I'm saying? So these are some of the things that I began to uncover in the studyings, and hopefully, this is just a small iota of what it is that's buried inside of this information. And like I said, after these different classes, we are going to be able to see this whole paradigm completely for what it is. Alright? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to run through a few things quickly. Yeah. And I'm gonna bring my brother Cheyenne on real quick to introduce himself and just let the family know, what we're gonna be doing in today's presentation. Peace.
Peace, family. What's going on? Next time we'll get the technical stuff a whole lot better for everybody. It's the first week, so bear with us and all of that. But just briefly, what we wanted to do with this particular web show is to make sure that we get across to the people that when you're talking about the Moorish legacy and you're talking about Moorish history, Moorish law, it gets convoluted in a lot of other concepts these days, whether it's sovereign citizen information, whether that's, the paperwork rush situation, or, there's, different rifts or different conflicts between different houses of people who identify themselves as Moors, people who identify themselves as other things. The main key point is that you're really not going to be aware or cognizant of the actual Moorish paradigm to, borrow from the Elder Hakim. You're not really going to understand the complexity of it and how it relates today if you don't understand how history is connected to it. There's a lot of people, that's done some historical research, whether that's reading Ivan Van Sertima's books, whether that's, reading all the other various books that relate to Moorish history. But I think it was Abdullah, the elder that teaches etymology. He said you can't teach law, Moorish law, you can't teach law without history. So if you want to understand the law better, it's best to understand the Moorish history first. That's because right. That'll lay the foundation for why certain things are the way they are today. And like I said, what we're going to, show you in presentation-wise is the fact that when we trace history back to certain events that is relative to our paradigm today, we're going to have to factor in the Punic Wars. You're going to have to factor that in because that's where you see a change in the shape in the geographical jurisdictions that existed in the world. A lot of people, they say, yeah, we all come from Africa. We all come from one place in Africa, equatorial Africa. But what about when it was one continent? When it was all the land masses was connected? We was there then, so where did we come from then? So, it's not so much as important to get back to when we was coming out of the womb or we was born in some kind of germ or something like that. We don't have to go back that far to find out what's the problem. All we got to do is start with the Punic Wars. There's a lot of research that goes along with that prior events leading up to the Punic Wars, but that's a very important period of time in which a lot of these different things you're starting to see as far as jurisdiction take shape. And that's the main key thing you got to key in on is jurisdiction and what are the parties that are controlling particular jurisdictions. Because as you trace it from history on down to now, there's always some different political bodies utilizing certain theocratic systems to gain control of those jurisdictions. So I just wanted to say that to set the groundwork for how the Punic Wars plays out.
So how many of the family are familiar with the Punic Wars? Okay. One of the most famous characters that come out of the Punic Wars is our brother Hannibal. All right. Hit it a little lower. A little more lower. All right. All right, let's get this thing going. So, this is the Moorish Empire. These are some of the symbols that we might be familiar with these days. The fez, five-pointed star, the circle 7, the the Moorish flag. But how many of us truly know the history behind these things? How many of us truly know where this ties into world history? I want to start this presentation off with peace. In other words, Islam. I, self-law, master. All right, we're going to qualify all of these symbols that we see the Moors dealing with these days. Okay? Now, many of us have no idea that the Moorish Empire started in Africa, North Africa to say the least. There was all kind of confusion going on about the Moors not wanting to claim Africa when the Moors have historically, beyond a reasonable doubt, known to be from Africa, Mauritania, Morocco, Algiers, and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? This picture that you see right here is of a Moorish warrior, a mufti. Okay? He's called a palace guard. In the palaces of Spain, and the palaces in Africa, and the palaces in Baghdad, and all kind of places, this is what you would see. This picture right here particularly looks familiar because this brother here is, I believe that this is a modern picture that they just made because the brother Michael J. White is portraying a Moor in a new movie. This footage right here, due to the fact that we don't have the speaker hooked up to the computer, you might not be able to hear what Barack Obama is saying, but by the next presentation we will represent this and show you. In this speech that he did in Cairo, he basically laid out to the world that he not only knows about the Moors, but that he's basically co-signing the whole Moorish paradigm and the legacy of the Moors. But and during the whole presentation, once we finish covering everything, we're going to return to the speech to have a clearer understanding of what he did in this demonstration. And if the family understands, after he did this speech, this is when he started getting attacked by the right wing ferociously.
Why don't you put the mic up to the speaker so they can hear it? Think so?
Okay. Can you hear it through the speakers?
You don't think so?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Now, like we said earlier, the wife, Michelle Obama, made a historic trip to Moorish Spain this summer with her daughter. Now, she didn't go to Christian Spain. She didn't go to the beaches of Spain. She went directly to the castles, where the Moors, you know, where the Moorish paradigm once ruled and whatnot. And the people in Spain were blown away. Now, there's a lot of symbology in that whole gesture that she did, but we're not going to get into that this moment or whatnot. We're just laying the groundwork for the family to let you know that this whole Moorish paradigm thing is beginning to reawaken again. Okay? So they're in the White House right now talking about the Moors. This is the movie that Michael J. White is going to be starring in, called The Moor. There he goes as a Moorish warrior. Now, some people might be confused and say, you know, I saw a lot of Asians in that clip. Like, what's going on with that? Not knowing that the Moors were, because let's talk about it at first, the Moors embraced Islam, right? Now, if we look at a world map, we could understand that Islam spreads all over the world. One of the most concentrated population of Muslims is in China. And then if we study, we're going to get into what we call the Silk Road. The Silk Road is, the Silk Road took place, it was a trading route that took place historically with China, India, Kemet, North Africa, and then into Europe via the Iberian Peninsula. So when you see the brother demonstrating with the Asians and whatnot, you know, he's that's why I love this movie, this clip right here, because they're going to cover the whole spectrum and show that we tie into all of that. Now, something that's even more interesting is recently a report came out, I'm going to read it. Nazi leader Adolf Hitler had Jewish or African ancestors. Communities he had pledged to exterminate. New DNA tests have revealed, as a British newspaper reported, that samples taken from Hitler's relatives link him to both the Jewish community and people from North Africa. Jean-Paul Mulders, a journalist, was able to investigate Hitler's DNA after he managed to lay his hands on a serviette dropped by the dictator's great-nephew Alexander Stuart Houston, who lives in New York. He got a second sample from an Austrian cousin of Hitler, a farmer known as Norbert H., the media report said. The DNA test threw up a startling result as it revealed the form of the Y chromosome that is rare in Germany and the rest of Western Europe, as its origin is from Jewish and North African groups. We're going to show in this presentation, when they say Jewish, they're talking about you. When they say North Africa, that's a code word of the Moors. They're calling it Berber. But when they say Berber, it's also saying Moor. It's basically, we had all kind of names, and I'm going to show and prove. Okay? So, like I said, these are some of the images of our kinfolk, of our people. There is nothing to be ashamed of. It's all kind of dysfunctional information out here. They got people denying their Moorish ancestry, got people denying where they come from and things of that nature. But hopefully by the end of this presentation, we're going to show beyond reasonable doubt that this is your kinfolk, this is your family.
That's right.
And there's nothing to be ashamed of. These are more images of the Moors in antiquity, inside of the palaces. Basically, you know, demonstrating, look at the brother here. He's wrapped in silk. He got himself a musket, a sword, a spear. He got the little thing on the side. Sometimes those were pouches with magic in them and things of that nature. So, you know, we just demonstrating and showing that we do come from royalty. These are Berber women right here that you see, and this is also a famous picture of the Moorish chief that you see. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people have these pictures in the crib, but might not really know what it is or what it draws back to. You know what I'm saying? So, these sisters that you see, these beautiful Moorish sisters, could be found today in North Africa, in the regions of Morocco and things. This here is a famous Shakespeare play called Othello. Many of us read the book, many of us read the plays in our high school days or even in college. Okay? This play was based on a Moor. Othello was a Moor. Othello was a prince. And, you know, the story was a tragedy. He kills himself for a Caucasian woman. And, you know, but nevertheless, this play here should be reread and explained to our people who it is that they're truly talking about. All right? Now let's get into some breakdowns. The word Moor literally means black. So the Moors were the black people according to Robert Jastrow. The Frenchman de Fontenelle in 1686 speculated on what kind of people inhabited the planet Venus. I can tell from here what the inhabitants of Venus are like. They resemble the Moors of Granada, a small black people burnt by the sun, full of wit and fire, always enrolled, writing verses, tons of music, arranging festivals, dances, and tournaments every day. And that's in the introduction into Moors in Spain, one of the books that I get a lot of my information from. By Ivan Van Sertima. I recommend that book for everybody to basically have in their collections and to study, because, you know, it's not like the book doesn't go over your head. It's very simple. This is the beginning of our presentation where we're going to talk about the tribes of Phoenicia, the Phoenicians. You understand? This footage right here, this image right here is an archaeologist inside of the Sahara getting the DNA samples from desert-dwelling Africans to basically find the so-called forgotten or lost race of the Phoenicians. And they basically did a study, and it shows that this race is not forgotten and they're not lost. They're still amongst us in the deserts of Africa. Okay, this is the Phoenician alphabets right here to show basically the correlation between the hieroglyphics, the Phoenician alphabet, all the way into the modern day alphabet. It's kind of blurry. See if I can adjust it. Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute because I don't want to mess this up. This map right here are the Phoenician trades and the Phoenician trade and colonies. Now, when we talk about the Carthaginians in Carthage, where Hannibal and the Punic Wars were most renowned for, we're basically, when we say Carthaginians, it's similar to us saying New Yorkers, because Carthage was only, it was basically a place. It's a location. So when you talk about the Carthaginians, you're not actually talking about the nationality of the people. They were known as the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians were a seafaring, merchant race of people who were known for their commerce, known for their trade, and also known for their war. They had the whole waters basically around North Africa, also into the Iberian Peninsula on lock. Okay? And the wars that they had with the Romans are the Punic Wars, and that's what we're going to be getting into. Okay, so from here I'm going to let my brother Cheyenne basically get into the history of the Punics, the Punic Wars, and the brothers from the Phoenicians.
Indeed, definitely. I want to go to the next clip.
You just got to press the space.
All right, no problem. All right, well, as it relates to Carthage and the Phoenicians, and you hear all of these various different names, you know, whether it's black, it's Phoenician, it's Numidian. Let's trace the Berber. Let's trace some of these relative, you know, names. Later in the presentation, we have some maps. We'll definitely show you some maps so you can trace some of these things. But when we discuss Numidian, let's talk about Numidian. Numidian actually means nomadic. It means, you know, nomadic tribes. Let me tell you what's important about a nomadic tribe. When you look at the current formation of the United States of America, the way the corporate jurisdictions are laid out, you're going to see that it covers an expansive amount of territory for each state. Now, each one of these particular states that it's, you know, accounting for is actually based around the patterns of the nomadic tribes here. You understand what I'm saying? So when you factor in these nomadic tribes in North Africa, as it's called, because you'll notice that it wasn't called Africa or Africa Nova or Africa Raleigh until after the Punic Wars. This is where it got the name and the term Africa from. If you don't understand that that's where the term Africa comes from, then you're not going to understand how that relates to Moors at that particular time, because it says that the Numidians were a nomadic tribe of Moors. They came from the Moorish tribe, as it's called. You see what I'm saying? So as it comes from the Moorish tribe, this Moorish tribe in Egypt was known as Ma, or Ma. If you understand the word Moor in more conventional terms of, let's say, you know, seafaring and vessels and different things of that capacity, you're going to come to the conclusion that Ma actually means water, and Moor means water. It comes from, you know, the actual primordial waters, as it's known in Egypt as Noon. So that's the relation with Moor. Also, you can check out the Maori tribe, M-A-O-R-I, the Maori tribe. They're going to specifically tell you that the word and term Moor comes from an actual term meaning natural, or something that is because it exists. You can check that out from the Maori people, and they actually come from New Zealand. So when you trace that term around, you know, Numidian, and when they say that the Moors are black, when they're talking about black, you know, those terms are not retroactive. So who became identified as black is what's being attached to who the Moors are, because all you find out is there's variations of melanated people in North Africa, as they call it. See, so before it became North Africa, it was Mauritania, Numidia, and Libya. Now the term Mauritania was actually placed on that specific territorial jurisdiction due to the fact that it was first conquered in the Punic Wars. So a portion of the Numidian territory then became known as Mauritania. So territorially, Mauritania became known for the actual land jurisdiction that was taken over by the Holy Roman Empire. You know, as the elder said last week, a lot of these particular terms was placed on after a certain period of time, which means that it's actually closer to our date range than more so of it being thousands of years ago. That actually is not the case. So, you know, just adding that backdrop to Carthage, the Punic Wars, and how these terms actually came to be about. One thing that's very important to understand as well is when you discuss the term Berber. The term Berber means barbar. That's just what it means. It comes from the Greeks. It means barbar. Barbar was a term that was utilized to say that they didn't understand the language that somebody else was speaking. So that's just like saying, you know, you're talking hogwash. You know, hogwash equals barbar, which translates into Berber. All right, and that's where it comes from. It doesn't mean a nation of people, a group of people, you know, any particular designation that these people come from. That's what it pertains to. So just adding those particular layers on the landscape of this whole Phoenician Punic Wars, because that's actually what the term Punic comes from. It comes from the word Phoenician. So based on the landscape of these particular things, you'll see how various different jurisdictions, as it fell to the Holy Roman Empire, then became a part of the actual Holy Roman Empire, ending in North Africa being called North Africa because they conquered the coast. Prior to that, it was Numidia or Libya. You see what I'm saying? So that's a very important thing to understand as it relates to the Moors in North Africa. Without understanding that, you know, you're not going to understand who came and imposed these particular jurisdictional boundaries. That's the way you get to track history properly, when you look at the various territorial jurisdictional boundaries and you match that up with who conquered it and who called it what. If you don't do that, then you're just going to call everybody from everywhere the same thing. You know, you can't call everybody one thing, no, even more. You know, because there's a tribe called the Arumu people. The Arumu people is supposed to be the 25th dynasty descendants. They're supposed to be the exact 25th dynasty descendants. And they say that they're neither Christian nor Moor. Now, we just went through the term of what Moor means as it relates to, you know, seafaring issues. It relates to the water. It relates to natural people, all of these various different things. However, you can't say everybody's a Moor just because some people may find offense to it. That's not necessarily what their tribe called it. So what that does is it gives us a little bit of context. It gives us the context that when you start to see interaction between European culture and Aboriginal culture, then you start to see them refer to these people as the Moors. Now, the term Moor also goes back to Egypt to mean Lord. So when these people would meet in their specific lords in various different, you know, lands, that's what they knew the Moors as. So any term relative to Lord means a title of nobility. So Moor was associated with the kings and queens of Europe because that's where the European encountered us first at. So when we take that into consideration, we also start to factor in that most of the domestic tribes that were in the interior of what is called Africa wasn't doing coastal trading as the Moors were, because the Moors were seafarers. That's already acknowledged. And a lot of people say that the Olmecs weren't Moors. You know, they weren't Moors. There's no way to prove they didn't wear feathers. But they came from West Africa, and they got to West Africa from Kush, and they were seafarers. So that tells you right then and there that anybody who was hitting the seas was Moors, whether through genetic lineage or by political association. Because what you start to understand is that even though Moor has its application in natural terms, it also has its application in a political sense, because it represented the political affiliations. And a book that we'll be showing as well is called The Reign of Ferdinand and Isabella. In this particular book, it talks about the Moors of Andalus, that there were only out of 300,000 inhabitants of Al-Andalus, there was only 500 that were of pure Moorish descent. So what does that mean? Okay, that means that out of all of the inhabitants, there was only about 500 who actually descended from Moors. So you can, and this was about 1489. So this gives you the landscape for how the Moors lost power in all of these various places that they conquered through maritime law. That's where maritime law comes from. A lot of people say, oh, we're under maritime law. We're under maritime law. That's Moorish law. That's the law of the seas. When they say that the law of the seas was brought on land, that means the Moors conquered these particular lands. Because you factor in, there's another map that we'll show as well, if we get a chance to. It's going to show you Mare Britannicum, Mare Balticum, Mare Mediterranean, Mare Atlant, Mare Germanicum, Mare Adirondack, Mare Hibernicum. All of these different seas was named after the Moors. This is proof that, and this is all before the Punic Wars, these particular maps in these particular jurisdictions. Then as you start to see the Punic Wars proceed, you start to see Mare Mediterranean, and you start to see it without the Mare in front of it. You just start to see the map show you as it's just Mediterranean. And then you start to see the different coasts on North Africa being renamed after Roman generals. All of these different things took place prior to the Second Punic Wars. So by the time the First Punic Wars was over, you had the installation of people like King Juba II and King Juba I, which came before him. Now, King Juba, a lot of people don't actually know and realize who he is. We got some artifacts and different things we're going to show as well. But he's actually well, let me put it this way. Out in Spain, the Moors had what you would call these seafarers who weren't necessarily pirates, but they operated off of their own sovereign, quote-unquote, jurisdiction. So anything that entered their jurisdiction, in particular, they actually took the opportunity and the chance to say, okay, all of this in this particular area ocean belongs to us. So by the time the first Punic Wars is underway, you start to see various different Moors working for the Roman side, for the Holy Roman Empire. This is what allowed the actual, let's say, Romans to be able to perfect their actual war against the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians, which was really a city built by the Phoenicians. You actually start to see them win because up until that point, the Romans had no navy. You see what I'm saying? So because the Romans had no navy, this means that they weren't actually able to engage properly in a war with the Moors until the Moors actually started to assist the Romans or the Holy Roman Empire by being mercenaries. So we can see these particular things take place over a number of period of times. You see what I'm saying? Where you have the Moors fighting for the other side and the other team. So take that into consideration when you look at the Punic Wars, because also, as we discussed Hannibal, a lot of people don't know that Hannibal marched into Europe by going by way of the Iberian Peninsula. So he went through Spain first. So even though Carthage was directly across the river from Rome, you have Hannibal going along the coast of North Africa up into the Iberian Peninsula and then back down into where you see Italy and Sicily at. So it's a very important thing to take that into consideration as well. Also, the thing about the Phoenicians at that particular time is that they're also the Canaanites of the Bible. So the Canaanites, a lot of people believe that the Canaanites was Albions, or they were pale people. The Canaanites weren't pale people and they weren't Albions.
That's right.
The Canaanites was the Moors, or the Phoenicians, or the traders. Because if you look at with the actual land of Canaan was called the land of milk and honey. When you look at the coast of where modern day Israel is situated at, that's where the quote unquote Canaanites are from. That's a major port city. And if anybody knows their history correctly, Israel was not trying to claim that particular portion as its home territory. It was actually trying to claim Uganda as its home territory. So that would put it right in conflict with the whole Egypt starting in, or pre-dynastic Egypt starting in Kush or Southern Sudan or Uganda. So take that into consideration as you start to look at the way the Punic Wars was forming, because at the time Hannibal actually was waging an entire war against the Holy Roman Empire, it was his cousin who came in and actually told the Romans how he was actually planning to defeat them. So even though when Hannibal was actually away on the actual battle, there was a ruling passed, so to speak, by the reigning political party at that time with Carthage. And it was his grandfather was involved in it somehow, or it might be a great uncle, and some other family members and some other generals who decided, in a council of elders who specifically decided that they did not want to crush the Holy Roman Empire. So they made a conscious decision to not do that. When they took that decision, you actually then see Hannibal's cousins sell him out to the Romans, and those were the two main factors that broke the back of Hannibal. And the entire, I think it was the first Punic Wars, or maybe the second, don't quote me on that one specifically. But that was about the first time where you actually see a decline, a sharp decline in the power that Carthage held. You see this continue all the way up until, let's say 46 BC as they call it, because once they start implementing these BCs, and because another date that y'all should check out is CE. Anybody knows what CE is? Common Era. Right. Now what's the Common Era? As opposed to the, before Christ. Because I got some maps circled 108 and 106, that's 108 and 106 CE, Common Era. So you got to ask yourself a lot of those different things as well. So with the birth of, King Juba II, which we actually have some artifacts that was found in Ohio, right, and Brazil, in the Amazon rainforest, on the river exactly, they found gold coins, gold medallions of King Juba, and he was wearing an Egyptian Uraeus crown, so on and so forth. So, but he was supposed to be the son of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Okay, a lot of people in history, including Josephus, I think but he didn't really exist either. But some things in his books, as well as others, suggest that Juba is the actual Jesus that was talked about, being the son of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and he's also known in the Talmud as Esau Panthera, because they're both existing at these particular times. It's very important to understand Moorish history by looking into all the Messiah types, especially their relation with the Holy Roman Empire. Because what they did with Jesus at that particular time when they came with the Christian doctrine is they took all of the rebels that were, giving them a problem in those jurisdictions. And each one of us, because we were dealing with the same science, just in different capacities, had prophecies of messiahs coming, and prophecies of these messiahs representing the sun god and so on and so forth. So by the time these things took place, you actually see that the Roman Empire just adapted it because they were actual political prisoners and rebels that they were fighting against during these very Punic Wars. Because it wasn't until after the Punic War that you really see Rome come into its fullness. And that would specifically be during the after Christ period, the AD period. Because up until 46 and 47 BC on down is where they're still fighting the Punic Wars. So they didn't emerge on the scene as a world power until after the Third Punic Wars, which is pretty much complementary to World War I, II, and III. It's the same exact type of situation when you talk about the Punic Wars. So just in a broad fashion that we'll get into in more details, as the weeks progress and the time progress, that's what the Punic Wars encompasses. That's where it comes into conflict with modern classical history, in which the founding of, Africa starts with the Holy Roman Empire and the Punic Wars.
Can you talk about Carthage in Europe, mainly in Sicily, in Spain? Because I believe the Second Punic Wars took place mainly in Sicily.
Right, correct. That's the one that involved Hannibal.
Mm-hmm.
What you had is, like I was telling them earlier, that Hannibal, when he was crossing into Sicily, did it by way of the Iberian Peninsula. What you find with the Carthaginians and the Sicilians is an actual relationship where the Phoenicians were there in Sicily prior to the rise of the Roman Empire. So at let's say around that same time period when the Carthaginians actually lost Sicily, that's where you actually start to see the Sicilians come in. And that wasn't by way of Hannibal, actually. It was much later that they actually lost Sicily. That the Carthaginians lost Sicily. Once the Sicilians pretty much picked up that island, that's when the Roman Empire became strong, because that was a pivotal island between the Carthaginians and the Italians or the Romans or the Sicilians, as they have it. That was what you would call Baghdad in the Iraq War. That was it's one of those things that if you take that city, you pretty much won the rest of the war. And that's how important Sicily was. And the reason it was so important is because it was right across from Carthage. So you can draw a straight direct line from Carthage, or where Carthage was, on into where Sicily was at. And then you can actually then start to see why it was so pivotal in its relation to the whole the Mediterranean Sea. You know what I mean?
So by proxy, being that you can identify the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians inside of Europe in the BC era, therefore we can also say that gave rise to mulatto races and basically a bloodline or a mixture of bloodlines that, we were warring against, we were warring with, and things of that nature.
Indeed. If anybody has the book, it's a book called Black Spark, White Fire. Make sure y'all check that book out. I've said it many times before. But in this particular book, it has a quote from the Romans who say that they hate the pale-skinned nations to the north, and they hate the dark-skinned nations to the south. So that's to let you know that the Romans and the Greeks weren't pale Albions that people see today. They're equivalent to what people would call Latinos. You see what I'm saying? That's what it actually is. And the actual society of Greeks and Romans, those things don't really denote or even connote, for lack of thereof, of skin complexion. It's talking about the way people categorize themselves was after a particular geographic location.
Yeah, actually, the word Rome meant any person in a fortified city. And a walled fortified city was Rome or Rome.
It won't reach. Yeah, sorry about that. Say that again.
That anybody in a fortified or walled city was called Rome, which means citizen of a walled fortified city. It had nothing to do with color. That's why the Romanians, the Gypsies are called Romani.
Right.
Because they was those who were actually exiled from a walled city, fortified city.
And if I'm correct, that's the actual time period where you had all of these various city-states, which it was when you look at a state today, let's say you look at New York State, or you look at the boundaries of California State, the territories and jurisdictions wasn't organized in that fashion back then. They were organized in a fashion much like, let's say, okay, this is DC, this is New York, this is Philly, this is Detroit, this is Chicago, and there'd be a king of Chicago, it'd be a king of New York, so on and so forth for these particular cities. And these cities would be confederated with each other, and that may form somewhat of the national character, but it was mainly based out of the actual city-states. So when you look at Carthage as a city-state, and then you look at the Numidian kingdom as a city-state, and Mauritania as a city-state, then you can get the picture for how these particular different walled cities, because that was actually a building structure that the Romans created. And when you look up Aboriginal in the Oxford Dictionary, 1933, it'll tell you that Aboriginal is a pre-Roman race that built Italy. So that's the definition. I haven't got to the bottom of why it says that, but that's what it says. So taking that into consideration, the complexion of these particular forces at the time, be it Roman, Carthaginian, so on and so forth, were actually what you would call today misnomer as Black and Latino wars. That was the exact composition of it. However, it wasn't just dark people on this side, light people on that side. Everything was mixed in together. You understand? So it's not just, the situation is not black and white. The situation is that these were really wars that were fighting over which Moors was going to rule parts in certain dominions. That's what particularly was taking place. And through this, you have what you call the Visigoths and the overall Germans, who were pale people, coming in, mixing in, causing the Moorish lineage to, in fact, become less pure than it was. And that is what you pretty much founded your Spanish, French, Britain, those type of Europeans came out of the mixing from those northern Nordic tribes and the Roman Greek people and citizens, and the actual quote-unquote North Africans, as they would say. So that's the different things that, pretty much went into making the racial makeup, for lack of better words, or the complexion makeup of the people at that particular time. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
All right, true. So, you want to?
No. I
And pardon me with this presentation, it's just for the live stream, we gotta have the lights on so they'll be able to see it. No, Cheyenne, you don't gotta hit the lights because it's not showing up on the, it's not showing up on the tape.
If you get on the screen, we could zoom in on the screen too. I mean, on the actual laptop screen, you know, for the live viewers.
All right.
You can zoom in.
I just want to read some text dealing with the Punic Wars for the family, just to reiterate what the brother was saying. The Punic Wars were a series of 3 wars fought between Rome and Carthage between 264 and 146 BCE. They are known as the Punic Wars because the Latin term for Carthaginian was Punici, older Phoenici from their Phoenician ancestry. The main cause of the Punic Wars was the clash of interests between the existing Carthaginian Empire and the expanding Roman Republic. The Romans were initially interested in expansion via Sicily, part of which lay under Carthaginian control. At the start of the First Punic Wars, Carthage was the dominant power in Italy. By the end of the Third War, after more than 100 years, and the deaths of many thousands of soldiers from both sides, Rome had conquered Carthage's empire and raised the city, becoming the most powerful state of the Western Mediterranean. With the end of the Macedonian Wars, which ran concurrently with the Punic Wars, and the defeat of the Seleucid king Antiochus III the Great in the Roman-Syrian War, Treaty of Apamea 188 BCE, in the Eastern Sea, Rome emerged as the dominant Mediterranean power and the most powerful city in the classical world. So like the brother was saying, these Punic Wars are akin to what the world wars were, because we know as a result of the world wars, this is when the U.S. rose in power and it took its stance as a superpower due to the demonstration of the atomic bomb. You dig what I'm saying? And due to the defeating of Germany and things of that nature. So we're seeing the emerging of the Roman Empire. Victory over Carthage in these wars gave Rome a preeminent status. It would retain until the division of the Roman Empire into the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire by Diocletian in 286 Common Era after Carthage's defeat. Only Greece remained as a power in the Mediterranean in addition to Rome. Victory over Carthage added considerable territory to the Roman Empire, which in turn resulted in the expansion of both the imperial civil service in order to govern new provinces and the army to police them. Subsequent to the Punic Wars, the army played an increasingly important part in the life and politics of the empire. This period of Roman history was later romanticized as a heroic age when all Romans were virtuous and everything worked, while the figure of Hannibal, the brilliant Carthaginian general, was demonized. Arguably, the Punic Wars transformed Rome from a regional to an international power. The structure that developed to rule the emerging empire gave it stability so that Romans could begin to regard their imperial project as one of bringing law, order, and security to the known world. So basically what it's saying is, by declaring war on an African empire of Carthage and the Phoenicians, Rome was able to conquer them, therefore conquering all of their provinces, all of their other empires. So what we're going to show you when we fast forward into the falling of the Moorish Empire post 1492 is the repeat of this. Because we're going to show that the Visigoths, the Gothic Empire, were what we call now as the Spaniards. The Visigoths were the empire that the Moors defeated in 711, and this is the same empire that came into power that defeated them via the Reconquista 800 years later in 1492, thereby taking over the Moorish provinces around the world, similar to what we see here with Rome and Carthage. Okay, so it's basically a repeat of that.
Islam.
Yes.
And
Islam.
the question is when we do further research, we will find, is it a repeat or is it it? Because look at the name Hannibal. Bao means bay, which means Lord. Hanni Bay.
Yeah.
So we're going to find out that they may be one and the same.
Well, yeah, and we're basically talking, like we're saying, we're qualifying the Carthaginians as being Moors. Because when we talk about Numidia and when we talk about the Phoenicians, we're talking about brothers from North Africa. We're talking about brothers from the same areas where we see the Moors emerge in, you know, post-Islamic, in the post-Islamic era. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about the same peoples. We're basically dealing with a different religion now, dealing with different comrades that they basically align themselves with, which would be the Arabs, and going back into Europe to reclaim and reconquer land that was lost, as we see, thousands of years ago. Okay? So, also of that of the United States and of other states outside of the European space, such as Australia and post-World War II Japan. Rome's legal system continues to form the basis of law in the modern world. The way in which the Punic Wars ended represents a major turning point in human history. In addition to transforming Rome's role in the classical age, it also meant that the civilization of the ancient Mediterranean passed to the modern world via Europe instead of Africa. The Romans were themselves convinced that the divine intervention lay behind their defeat of Carthage and that it was their destiny to rule the world. And like I said, we're also going to show that this did repeat itself when we go into the Moors in Spain. Since the earliest periods, the Moors, including the Berbers, had spread out from Central Sahara, Northern Africa, into Portugal, southern Spain, and southern France. Those in North Africa are described as the Berbers, Moors of North Africa, while those in Spain are described as the ancient Iberians, Ibero-Mauritanians. Those in the Mediterranean are called pre-Hellenistic Aegean or Cretians. Okay, the Berbers of Libya, North Africa, and the Mediterranean had in later antiquity fallen under the influence of the black Carthaginians, Phoenician sailors. Originally from the Horn of Africa, the Carthaginian Phoenicians, a seafaring migratory people, had settled in Canaan, Palestine, and Syria. A group of them later journeyed back again to their original motherland, Africa, but this time they settled along the coast of Tunisia. So what it's saying is, these Moors, these seafaring Moors, who basically, like I used the context before, the same way that we could become jet setters these days, and you can't stop us from being anywhere around the world because the invention of planes have made that accessible. We got to put it back into the same context of antiquity. The reason that we had these big ships and these boats and things of that nature and these maps is we were able to travel around the world. We did not believe that the world was flat. That's a farce, and we're going to show that as well. That the Europeans did not think that the world was flat. That's a lie that they told us in school. They knew the world was round. They knew that the world was vast. They didn't have access to the world. You understand? They were not allowed to go to certain places. They were landlocked. So, us being seafaring people, we not only were in Africa, we were in the Americas, we were in Asia, minor and major, as a result of these ships that we built. But there were certain races of us, or certain lineage and bloodlines of us that were the ones who were allowed to do these things. Not all of us did this. Do you understand? Like, not all of us were seafaring people. So these are the people that we are identifying who were the seafaring people who did spread the culture of Africa around the world, and as well brought the culture of other regions and empires into Africa to enrich the culture. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Islam.
Yes, sir.
The seafarers was a guild. That was actually a guild. Of course. Which means they protected those secrets by any means. You had Carthaginians that ran their ships. When they see the Roman following them, they was headed to the Americas. They ran their ships up against the rocks and sunk them so that the Romans wouldn't find out about over here.
Yes, they did.
It was a guild.
Yes, they did. Similar to what we would call a society. That's right. You know, like a secret society or something.
That's what it
you basically, exactly. So, you know, I don't want to jump ahead, but we'll deal with that. We'll deal with all of the secret societies. where they originated from, things of that nature. Carthage and Rome were soon colliding, since it was that the Romans had tried to muscle in on the lucrative maritime routes controlled exclusively by the Carthaginian Empire. The trade competition led to armed conflict known in history as the Punic Wars. Carthage lost both of the Punic Wars to regional upstart Rome. So, like this to say, Rome was leaning on the Carthaginians for these maps. You know what I'm saying? They wanted the spices, they wanted the gold, they wanted the women, they wanted all of these things that the Carthaginians were bringing back from their explorations around the world when they had relations and trade relations with different brothers and sisters around the known world. So Rome basically was muscling in, like they wanted in. They wanted to basically, you know, take over these routes. So what this war did was allow them to conquer in the name of the cross and in the name of Rome, and to basically, you know, take these routes. After losing the First Punic War to Rome, many Berbers became disaffected with the regional power Carthage and thus rebelled and gained a large amount of independence. In modern-day Algeria, then called Numidia, two main kingdoms emerged. These eventually united under Massinissa, who teamed up with Rome, and especially with Scipio Africanus, to launch devastating attacks on Carthage. So we're dealing with a level of basically treason. And we're also going to show that treason existed amongst our people to the point that the Moorish Empire, especially the one that the Iberian Moorish Empire, fell from within. You know what I'm saying? There was a 500-year war on their doorsteps that the Europeans launched against them, but there was also treason that occurred from within. There was treason that occurred from the dynasties that came forth from Africa. There was treason all around. So when we deal with history, we tend to deal with a lot of feel-good history. We always want to talk about how royal we were, how great we were, and how, you know, how pure and you know, unscathed we were until we came in contact with this beast. You understand? But we're going to show through our history that's not so much the case. That there's always been treason. That the heart of man has always been what the heart of man is today. You know what I'm saying? The best buyer wins. You know, people side with the winning team. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to have to dispel some of these feel-good theories that we have and start dealing with true facts. All right, let's where was Brother Cheyenne? Do you want me to get into some of the battles of Carthage, just to give the Punic Wars? All right. This is one of the battles called Lake Trasimene. And like I'm saying, I'm just trying to paint the picture of the conflicts that we had and some of the reasons why we lost power, just to give a greater, you know, overview of why these empires rose up in power. Because as a youth, I learned about Rome, but I had no idea how they came into power. I just thought they was powerful from the jump. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know that they fought with Africans and basically defeated them in 3 wars, which gave rise. They won't teach you that in school. Because if they teach you that in school, they will have to admit that you wasn't a savage. You dig what I'm saying? That you wasn't inferior with your intellect. That you wasn't someone that they had to come and Christianize. That throws away all of these missionary, you know, hoodwinks that they taught us in school. Okay, battles with Celtic tribesmen and the hazards of the journey took a heavy toll. The army numbered only 20,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. Yet by December, 2 months later, after defeat or tactical withdrawal of various Roman forces, the Carthaginian army had swelled again to 28,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. The reason is a significant one in development of this war. With each indication of Roman weakness, large numbers of Gauls or Celts abandoned their allegiance to Rome and joined Hannibal. Hannibal is banking on this being the pattern throughout Italy. So, like I said before, even on that side, we're dealing with treason. Due to who was winning the war, would basically determine where other people, other tribes, and other other Europeans begin to throw their support behind. So as the Carthaginians basically, and as Hannibal began to defeat the Romans, you was dealing with a bunch of different switch-siders. The Celts would jump on their side and help out, but as soon as they began to lose, the Celts would start to side with Rome and double-cross them. All right? After wintering in Boulogne, Hannibal moved south in the spring of 2017. In May, he lures a Roman army into a trap. On a misty morning, the Romans move into a narrow plain beside Lake Trasimene. Unknown to them, the surrounding hills are occupied by the Carthaginian army. When they swoop down, the Romans are unprepared and defenseless. Many are driven into the lake. As many as 15,000 are killed. Even with this psychological advantage, Hannibal decides against marching on Rome. Instead, he moves to the south of the peninsula, hoping that his success will persuade many of the often discontented Italian allies to join him. And this battle here is Cannae, 216 BC. The year 216 brings Hannibal his greatest victory in one of the most famous battles of history. The armies meet near the east coast at Cannae in an open plain which Hannibal has chosen as good ground for his cavalry, a section in which he outnumbers the Romans by perhaps 10,000 to 60,000, whereas his infantry are fewer than theirs, 35,000 to at least 48,000. Hannibal tactics are a classic case of enveloping an enemy. The center of his line yields slowly to the Roman assault, thus forming a crescent, which becomes a complete circle when his cavalry gallop round from the wings. The Romans, constricted in space, are fighting in all directions. Only about 10,000 escape from this disaster. Then the next battle is the Fabian Tactics, 216 to 203 BC. After this victory, many of Rome's allies in southern and central Italy desert to Hannibal's cause, but a majority stand firm in their allegiance. To that extent, his strategy has failed. He commands the most powerful army in the Italian peninsula, but even so is not strong enough to besiege Rome into submission. Rome, in her turn, now has a devastating strategy pioneered by Fabius. The success of his policy wins him the title Cunctator, the delayer. His technique is for Roman armies to pester Hannibal continuously, denying him supplies or easy passage, but wherever possible avoiding direct engagement. Gradually, over 12 years, the strategy succeeds. Hannibal becomes like a bull in a ring, tormented by lesser beings while his strength slowly ebbs away. The extraordinary fact is how long he remains within Italy as an alien force, almost totally isolated. Reinforcements sometimes come from Carthage, but few and infrequently. Having arrived through the Alps in 218 BC, he does not finally depart until 203. The eventual reason is the need to defend Carthage, which is now threatened by a Roman army. Hannibal meets it in 202 at Zama, an unidentified site in northern Tunisia. For the first time in his life, he is decisively defeated. Rome is at last in a position to impose terms. So that's how they were defeated in the Second Punic Wars. That's how basically Hannibal and Carthage fell, and then they basically had to go to the, they had to submit to the terms. In war, at the end of a war, the one who basically is the successor is able to give up treaties, you know what I'm saying, and he gives up terms to the person that he defeats. So after that, you know, they became like a vassal state where they basically had to pay tribute and things of that nature, and they carved up all of the land. Politically, this represented the end for Carthage, but commercially, these people, true to their Phoenician origins, proved irrepressible. By the middle of the century, they are again exciting Roman jealousy. Delanda es Carthago, Carthage must be destroyed, became the obsessive refrain of Cato, a leading orator in Rome. The Third Punic War, which was from 149 to 146 BC. Rome picks a quarrel in 150 BC on the basis of an infringement of the treaty's terms. The Carthaginians have taken up arms against an invading neighbor and have been defeated, so technically they have gone to war without Rome's permission. Rome's vindictive attitude is evident in the terms offered in 149. The Carthaginians will be spared reprisals if they abandon their great city, of which the walls and harbor are to be destroyed, and move to an inland site well away from the sea where trade of any kind will be impossible. Carthage begins to prepare itself for a siege. The city's defenses are so strong and the resistance of the Carthaginians so desperate that the siege lasts for 3 years. When Carthage is finally starved into submission in 146 BC, a population of 250,000 have been reduced to 50,000. These survivors are sold into slavery. The city burns for 17 days, after which the ground is cleared and plowed. Salt is scattered in the furrows, and a curse is pronounced to ensure that neither houses nor crops will ever rise here again. This obsessive frenzy of destruction has a sting in the tail for the Romans. When they later wish to found a new city on this strategic site, the curse proves something of a psychological obstacle for potential settlers. So, you know, that's basically how they wiped out the empire. You know what I'm saying? And henceforth, we find, you know, this whole, the whole legacy is basically buried for years, for hundreds of years. And it begins to rise back up when you see the resurrection of the Moorish Empire. Now, the area that I'm about to speak about is called the Maghreb. It's spelled M-A-G-H-R-E-B, or other people spell it in M-A-G-H-R-I-B, okay? And the Maghreb or Maghreb is the name given in pre-modern times by Arab writers on geography and history to the northern part of Africa, that which Europeans often came to call Barbary. The Arabic word Maghreb means place where the sun sets, i.e. the west, in opposition to Mashriq, place where the sun rises, i.e. the east. In modern usage, the Maghreb compromises the political units of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Mauritania. To the north, the region is bounded by the Mediterranean Sea, and to the west by the Atlantic Ocean, running from the Straits of Gibraltar southwestwards to the deserts of Mauritania. To the eastern boundary is geographically open, and some medieval Arab geographers made the Maghreb, especially westward from Alexandria in Egypt, although most accepted that Egypt was in fact outside the Maghreb. At present, the term Maghreb or Maghrib continues to be used in opposition to Mashriq, but it also can simplify and imply the Kingdom of Morocco, especially in the form Al-Maghrib or Al-Aqsa, the farthest Maghreb. In addition, the political union of the North African countries sought by statesmen and politicians since the independence of their respective countries is called Al-Maghrib Al-Kabir, the greater Maghreb. So this area that we're talking about is basically the area where many of the Moorish dynasties and the Moorish empires rose up. That's going to be the whole area that we're going to be talking about when we deal with the Moors of Spain and this whole 7-Eleven thing. Although the Mauritani inhabit a country, the greatest part of which is very fertile, yet the people in general continue to this time to live like nomads. They bestow care to improve their looks by plaiting their hair, trimming their beards, by wearing golden ornaments, cleaning their teeth, and paring their nails. And you would rarely see them touch one another as they walk, lest they should disturb the arrangement of their hair. They fight for the most part on horseback with the javelin and ride on bareback on the horse with bridles made of rushes. They also have swords. The foot soldiers present against the enemy as shield the skin of elephants. They wear the skin of lions, panthers, and bears and sleep in them. These tribes and the Maasai next to them are for the most part the Africans in general, wear the same dress and arms and resemble one another in other respects. They ride horses which are small but spirited and tractable, so as to be guided by a switch. They have collars made out of cotton or hair from which hangs a leading rein. Some follow like dogs without being led. They have a small shield of leather and small lances with broad heads. Their tunics are loose with wide borders. Their cloak is a skin, as I've said before, which serves also as a breastplate.
So they're saying that's the Maghreb, Al-Qazi, the farthest west. That's where they say Morocco is at, and that's how they was dressing in Morocco.
No, he's saying this is how the Mauritanians were dressing.
So the Mauritanians dress the same way as the quote-unquote Africans dress, with panther skin, lion skin, and the works.
I mean, they are, yeah.
I'm just saying, that's what the book said, and they say don't mess with their hair. You don't touch their hair.
Yes, sir.
It's like the same people to me.
That's right.
Yeah. So another area that we need to speak about, and then we'll be touching on, is called the Levant. Prior to the formation of the Middle East, this area, the Levant, for many of us who are into religion, this whole area is basically mentioned in the Bible and in the Quran and the Torah many times. The Levant encompasses the kingdom of Edom, the kingdom of Moab, the kingdom of Ammon, the Nubatu tribes, the Arubu tribes, the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah. You know what I'm saying? The Levant, also known as, or it says it in Arabic, Al-Masriq, describes traditionally the Eastern Mediterranean at large, but can be used as a geographical term that denotes a large area in Western Asia formed by the lands bordering the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, roughly bounded on the north by the Taurus Mountains, on the south by the Arabian Desert, and on the west by the Mediterranean Sea, while on the east it extends towards the Zagros Mountains. The Levant includes Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian territories. Does that sound familiar? Because the last time I checked, those are the areas where all of these conflicts are taking place. You dig what I'm saying? And these areas have been in conflict through biblical times, but more so now. Especially when they deal with like the axis of evil, especially when they deal with areas that they have, you know, all of these problems with. You know what I'm saying? These Christian powers that rule, you know, the East and the West, always talks about these areas. The UCL Institute of Archaeology describes the Levant as the crossroads of Western Asia, the Eastern Mediterranean, and Northeast Africa. Levant was originally applied to the Mediterranean lands east of Italy, from the Middle French word Levant meaning the Orient. So that's your Orient right there. Historically, the trade on the Levant between Western Europe and the Ottoman Empire was of great economic importance. An imprecise term, Levant, refers to an area of cultural habitation rather than to a specific geographic region, and its meaning shifts according to the historical and cultural references and preference. All right? Now, after covering that area of the Levant, I want to begin to qualify who the inhabitants of the Levant was. Because who we might see there today might not be who was there thousands of years ago. Okay? One must recall that the concept of Arab nationality race as a sub-race of the Caucasians was non-existent until it was created by the Western political powers in the late 19th and early 20th century as a ploy to undermine the Ottoman Turk Empire. The concept of Arab as a racial identity different from the dominant black cultures of Middle East and the Horn of Africa was also non-existent at the time of Muhammad and at the time when the so-called Arab invasion of Africa, a coined term promoted by European Aryan scholarship, occurred. Arab refers to a language and culture, not to a racial origin. So when we call the people at the corner store Arabs, basically we were saying we shouldn't be calling them Arab because they appear what we think phenotypically as an Arab, but because they speak Arabic. So if we go to the mosque right now and we encounter brothers from Africa or even brothers that are here from the Americas that speak Arabic, they're Arabs. The Arabs are indeed a mixture of different peoples. Arabs themselves recognized to come from two unrelated patriarchs, Qattan, Southern Arabs, and Adnan, Northern Arabs, to be respectively identified with a Sabian, the Afro-Arabs, and the Ishmaelites, pale-skinned Arabs, linked with the Kurds and Turkish groups. Habib Hassan Toma, in his book Music of the Arabs, 1996, holds that an Arab, in the modern sense of the word, is one who is a national of an Arab state, has command of the Arabic language, and possesses a fundamental knowledge of Arabian tradition, that is, of the manners, customs, and political and social systems of the culture. Thus, contrary to the popular media representation of Arab, this term does not denote any particular phenotype, race, or color. Rather, it indicates a cultural system that evolved through cross-fertilization of thoughts across many centuries. Geographically, Africa is connected with Middle East through the Sinai. The land of Northeast Africa and Middle East shared a similar type of climate, topography, fauna, and flora. Moreover, the Red Sea has never been a barrier to communication and contact between the people that live along its coastlines. Then again, Africans came into Middle East and settled. They came as immigrant groups like the Cushites, the Egyptians, and the Phoenicians, people of Punt. I don't know if you spoke about the Phoenicians being referred to the people of Punt.
I didn't catch that one.
Yeah. Now the people of Punt, that goes into the whole, we could do a whole breakdown of that. Brother Azra Kwesi and a few other scholars talk about the mystical land of Punt. They blended together and became the later black Israelites, the black Syrians and Canaanites. They established themselves in the land and built many amazing cultures and civilizations. The builders of these civilizations maintained very close trade and cultural linkages with their African motherland. Accordingly, there have always been constant interchanges of cultural and commercial contact between the African peoples of East Africa and the African peoples of the Middle East. Middle East is a center of many of the world's biggest religions. Undoubtedly, the African continent and its people play significant roles in the formation of these religions. The literature and the liturgies of these religions recount the cultural centrality of Africa and their cosmology. Ethiopia, Libya, Kush, and Egypt feature constantly in the Torah, Bible, Quran, and the Hadiths. This is another clear indication of the significance of Africa to the people of the Middle East. Furthermore, just as is testified by the currently living black Palestinians, Iraqis, Iranians, Saudi Arabians, Kuwaits, Omans, Yemens, etc., black people have always been the original population of the Middle East, and they remain an integral part of the geographical zone to this very day. So all you hear from many corners of the conscious community is banging on Arabs. And then when you hear from the other side of the unconscious community is banging on the Middle East. bombs away to Iraq. I don't give a damn. Bomb them to smithereens. They blew up the damn towers, kill them all. Not knowing, especially if you speak to a veteran who came from Desert Storm or came out of Afghanistan or came out of Iraq, they'll let you know we over there killing black people. Wholesale. 1 million citizens is dead in Iraq. You dig what I'm saying? When they was in Basra population is damn near all black. And I spoke to veterans and they came back and was like, look, they gave us orders to just ride through these villages and just murk everybody. And I never spoke to nobody from Blackwater, so these are the soldiers that are from the army. Let's not talk about what Blackwater went in there and did. So we're talking about an assault on lands that we have historically emerged from. And if we know anything about the law of correspondence and all kind of other metaphysical, galactical laws, then we know if they destroy your birthplace, by proxy, they'll destroy your future. So all of these bunker bombs that they're dropping, all of the stuff that they're doing in these lands that I just named, all of these lands is on the hit list. Iraq, they're trying to go into Iran. They got beef with people in Saudi Arabia. They done destroyed Kuwait. They try to go up in Yemen. They doing all of these black op wars in all of these places. Who are they murdering? Who are they killing? What bloodlines are they targeting for destruction? Al-Qaeda is not a group. It's a list. You dig what I'm saying? Al-Qaeda is a database of names and tribes and people that they have deemed for execution. Not basically because you don't see no damn trials. They're not taking them to court. You know what I mean? They don't have no huge, like they don't have no world trials for these people. They sending predator drones and all of that, destroying them. So who are the people that they killing? And what are they taking out of these museums? You know what I'm saying? We gotta ask ourselves these questions. Archaeological and skeletal analysis confirmed that black Africans were the first and original inhabitants of Arabia. Genetic studies further confirm the close biological relationship between the people of Middle East and Africa. The fact is that the entire Middle East is virtually suffused with markers of African genetic imprints that it can be correctly described as a part of Africa which European imperialism pursuing religious bias have appropriated culturally. It is always interesting that there is a culturally and geographical defined place as Middle East, but there is no Middle West. So, like I said, we're talking about, we're qualifying these areas and we're talking about our relations to Arabia. So when we begin to talk about who these inhabitants were that basically went into Europe, we can get a greater understanding of who they truly were. Because contrary to popular belief, the way that they tell the story these days, these were Arabs, you know what I'm saying, or pale Arabs that ran up in, you know, they conquered Europe for damn near 800 years. But as we can see, the original inhabitants, the ones who primarily came out of Africa prior to the mixing of the races and whatnot, were our brothers and sisters. The ancient Maghreb, which spanned Morocco and Algeria, has been populated for longer than most of the rest of the world. There is evidence of people living there as far back as 200,000 BC, and cave paintings depict a fairly vibrant Neolithic culture thriving around 6,000 BC when the climate of the Sahara was very different. Then the area that is now Sahara had giant lakes and lush savanna land teeming with wildlife. Cultural complex were developed in the area and extended to nearby Iberia, onward across southern Europe as far back as the Black Sea. These people have been called various confusing names, such as Cro-Magnons, Grimaldi, Celto-Iberians, by European anthropologists to hide their African cultural roots. Eventually, the various people who lived in the Central Sahara area formed the people known as the Tuaregs, Moors, Berbers. At its shortest point to Africa, Spain is separated by a strait of water about 8 kilometers in width. It is possible to stand on one end of Africa and observe actions on the Spanish side of the coast. Racist Eurocentric scholars will want us to believe that for 100,000 years, the Africans who lived on the opposite side of the Mediterranean coast were so incurious and incapable that they could not cross an 8-mile water strait. Whereas the Cro-Magnon man could do a 10,000-kilometer trek across the impassable Mount Pyrenees, a mountain of barrier against ingress from European, and successfully established themselves in Spain. But the ridiculousness of such a thesis is self-evident. In full recognition of the fact that Africans were the first to establish communities on both sides of the Mediterranean coast, classical scholars have used such monikers as Celto-Iberians, the culture to describe the early inhabitants of Spain. Mauritanian stands for Moorish, which is Africans. A little bit more on the Black Arabians. Today, to repeat the old dictionary descriptions, those up until the 19th and early 20th centuries from Italy to England about the Moors being black has become controversial in some circles. By the mid-20th century, after the development of the Mediterranean race, Hamitic and Euro-African concepts in physical anthropology, as many African countries won their independence, many encyclopedias in the U.S. have begun to describe the Moors as simply Berbers and Arabs, defining them as Caucasoids. There could be little argument, however, about what the Moors looked like for several centuries in Muslim Spain and Portugal, because of the bulk of them were derived from the inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula, who in that time are described by other Arabidized people, whether Syrian, Iraqi, or Central Asian, as of a black or dark brown complexion. Ibn Mandhuri, a 13th century Tunisian-born linguist, said the Arabs called themselves black and the fair-skinned people red. This terminology apparently dated from the time of early pharaonic peoples in Egypt who used the word red in the same way. Now, when we look at the paintings on the walls of Kemet, the people were painted red, correct? Like a red-brown complexion. Right. So they differentiated the red people from the black people. The red were the light-skinned brothers and sisters, the golden complexion, whatnot, but they called them red. And then they called those of a darker complexion, which would be coming out of Kush, black. But the original Arabians and Berbers, who were called Mori or Moriso in Europe, were responsible for the word coming to mean black. Isidore of Seville in Spain wrote that the term meant blacks, as did early Latin and Greek writers. Today, the term Mavri is still used by Greeks to describe black people. The irony of history is that early Arab-speaking historians and linguists make a distinction between the Arabs in Arabia and the fair-skinned people of the north. And contrary to what may be fact in our day, in the days of early Islam, those called Arabs looked down condescendingly on fair-skinned populations and commonly used the phrase fair-skinned as a slave when describing individuals and tribes in the peninsula that were pale in complexion. According to the text, so we hear about slaves a lot, especially in Arabia, especially in the time of the coming of Islam. But as I just showed in this passage, and I'm also going to build on that a little bit further, that the Africans were looking down on fair-skinned complexion races due to what they deemed as the mixture of blood. So these people were basically to be bred as slaves. You know what I'm saying? According to the text, the precious necklace of Ibn Rabu or Rabi of Cordoba, there were very few things as rare and unthinkable as a fair-skinned Arab. of course, today, due mainly to slavery and conversion of peoples to the Arab nationality, the opposite is thought to be true by many in the West. You know what I'm saying?
I just want to say
You
something.
wanna-
Yeah, let me say a couple things real quick. Let me bring this up. Maybe I just want to read something. But based on what you said just now, it seems like there's there was, they talk about the slavery of the darker skinned people, but that was a slavery of the darker skinned people enslaving the fairer skinned people.
Yeah.
Right, so this is a clear indicator that lets us know that we've been doing this same cycle over and over for so many, eons, that when we come down to this day and time, we look at each other, don't like each other, but don't know why we don't like each other. It's because we've offended each other through so many centuries. Because apparently, the darker skinned people was enslaving the fairer skinned people first. So, and that's what you'll find a lot of times with the Moors in general, is that a lot of the things we complain about being inflicted upon us is what we actually inflicted upon others first. So it's really part of a large karmic debt. But I just wanted to read something quickly from what the elder said earlier about Baal and Hannibal. This is from Rome, Carthage, and the Punic Wars. I got it. It says the Carthaginian proper names. Excuse me. The Carthaginian proper names, which have come down to us from one among many proofs of the depths of their religious feelings, for they are all, of nearly all, compounded with the name of one or other of their chief gods. Hamilcar is he whom Melkarth protects. Hasdrubal is he whose help is in Baal. Hannibal, the Haniel of the Bible, is the grace of Baal, and so on with the Bamlaka, Himlako, Ethbal, Mahabal, Adabal, and Masdanabal. So I just wanted to add that on there because the elder was touching on that. Hannibal is actually a deity in many respects, the way it was looked at back in the days. He was a ruler who was considered a deity, and it's actually coming from Hannibal and the Lord Baal. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Like Bizu Baal means Lord of the Flies. Lord, Baal, Lord.
As have others before them, the author of the Muslim conquest and settlement of North Africa and Spain, Abdul Wahid Taha, used original sources to detail the settlement of early Arabian Muslims, as well as the later comers from Syria and elsewhere. Arabians were well into the 14th century, usually described as jet black to dark brown and woolly or kinky haired in text. Whether the authors were early Romans, medieval Europeans, Syrians, Turks, Iranians, or indigenous Arabians. Those Arabs in the peninsula who were no longer dark were considered to have slave origins or had settled among Syrian and other non-Arab populations of fair or red complexion. What do we call red people these days? We say red bone, right? If somebody is fair skinned, we'd be like, they red.
That's where it come from now.
So this is a historic identification of a complexion.
I remember the Europeans up to 1854 called themselves the Red Men's Party.
Exactly, the
They
Red,
changed
yeah.
to the Republican Party, but they called themselves Red Men.
Exactly, the Europeans, the Whigamores.
Yeah, they called them the Red Men's Whigs Party.
Yes.
And that became the Republican Party.
Yes, sir.
And they instituted the white supremacy. But before them, we called them the Red Man. Just like redneck.
Exactly, rednecks, and then they throw it on the so-called Indian. You know what I mean? With the whole explosion of the Westerns and whatnot, and they become the red man. But the original red man, not really. We show them the original red man were the Caucasians.
Also, the way he tied it into it being for fairer skin and even brown.
Yeah.
Because the term red was known as brown 500 years ago. It was brown. So brown was red and red was brown.
It was brown, exactly. Apparently, one can read such a statement in the Kitab al-Man, or Book of Oaths, which in book 15, number 4046, says, "We were sitting in the company of Abu Musa. Then he called for food, and it consisted of flesh of fowl. It was then that a person from Banu Ta'im visited him. His complexion was red, having a resemblance of a slave. The Arabs, in fact, were so black that, like the Africans, they used the term white, as in the other dark continent or Africa, referring to people of plainly brown color with clear skins who were of a very dark tone, such as the Tuareg or some of the Fulani population in the Sahara, which is why many brown-skinned African Americans still are referred to as white when traveling to African countries. Meanwhile, the color of fair-skinned Syrians, Persians, etc., and Europeans were called red, while the color of many sub-Saharan Africans were either referred to as brown or green, and only those literally black were called black or jet black."
What do they call Osiris? Green one, right?
Osiris is the green one. We're known for the olive complexion. They call it, in the Iberian Peninsula, they would say that we have olive complexions. Now, many of us eat olives, right? So we know that you have that greenish black complexion of the olives, then you got the black complexion olives. So, like people in the Mediterranean are known for their olive skin. Even Caucasians, you know what I'm saying? They got that olive skin tone.
Islam. So it's clearly stated that those class structures that are called black, white, brown, or red wasn't based on their phenotype. It was a status class.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into what all of those colors denoted. But apparently, from what I just read, it is denoting phenotype. It's denoting skin color. You know what I'm saying? All right. So, rise of the Moorish kingdom. In the aftermath of the fall of Rome, many of its former provinces and colonies were thrown into a state of insecurity and chaos. Material progress was in retrogression, and the outlook on life across the territories of the former imperial power was not very bright. In the beginning of the 7th century, the Arab prophet Muhammad began to preach the word of Islam. Consumed with religious fervor, Arabs, both black and pale, sought to spread the message of Islam to the entire world. By the year 708 AD, Islam had penetrated North Africa. North Africa was until then a province of the Byzantine Empire and hence under the influence of Christianity. Consequently, many African Moors accepted Islam in large numbers and began using Arabic, the language of Islam, as the national language. As the Muslim administrators aspired to cosmopolitanism, many immigrants moved into the great centers of the Islamic religion. Many Arabs, both Afro and pale, moved from the Middle East to the better opportunities offered by North Africa with its ancient connections to ancient Egypt and metropolitan Rome, as well as scientific, trade, and administrative know-how. Moreover, there were the usual Jewish community found universally across North Africa and the Middle East, as well as Syrians and some Southern Europeans. Who are the Moors? It was because of the conquering army in Spain was largely made up of Africans from Morocco that we hear such phrases as the Moorish invasion of Spain. And why Shakespeare's hero Othello is a Moor, and why the word blackamoor exists in the English language, a word which leaves no doubt as to the color of the army of occupation in Spain. The organization of education throughout the Muslim world began in the 8th century, and by the 9th, learned men in the schools of Cordoba in Spain were corresponding with learned men in Cairo, Baghdad, Bukhara, Samarkand. The Greek classics were rediscovered and Aristotle came into his own. The term Arabic we intend in a cultural rather than a racial sense. It was through Africa that new knowledge of China, India and Arabia reached Europe, and it was Africa which supplied the men who protected the Muslim Europe or Spain from attack, and thus made it possible for the new learning to take root and develop. That comes from the introduction from the Moors of Spain. These are many of the names that the Moors are known by. So when we begin to read, because what I've done is I picked up old books that I read when I was in high school, when I was just basically, a freshman learning these things. And now I'm beginning to see where it all makes sense, because now I'm able to decipher the information. So many of the names that we're known by, the Musulman, that's M-U-S-U-L-M-A-N. Sounds like Musselman. The Blackamoors, the Light Bearers, the Nobles, the Illuminated Ones, the Dark Knights, the Fruit of Islam, the Sovereigns, the Sword of Islam, the Sorcerers, the Saracens, the Moors, the Berbers, the North Africans, the Muslims, the Indians, and the Gypsies. That's just some of the names. But you got to remember, when they revised history and when they reconstructed history, they had to talk about you because you're still part of history, but they disguised your names. They promised to never say your name. And we know the power of uttering one's name. And we know the power of uttering a made-up name. Like if I call you outside of your name, you're going to feel disrespected. I could talk about you all the time, but if I make up a name about you, I won't never give you no kind of, it's like I won't even give you power. You dig what I'm saying? So all of, many of our stories are disguised in these identities. The aboriginal color of the Moors, we're going to still touch on that, like I said, because I want to hammer, I want to leave no doubt as to what's really going on, so we cannot leave our family confused. Because confused communication breeds disunity. And for the family that's part of the conscious community, this whole community is confused at this point. It's in disarray due to misinformation. So, the Moors, the hosts, wore silk clothes and colorful clothes which they had taken as booty. Their horses' reins were like fire, their faces as black as pitch. The handsomest among them was as black as a cooking pot, and their eyes blazed like fire. Their horses as swift as leopards. Their horsemen were cruel. Their horsemen more cruel than a wolf that comes to a sheepfold in the night. O luckless Spain. Description of the Moors written in the 1200s AD and cited in the Introduction to African Civilization by Willis N. Huggins and John J. Jackson. As for the black sheep, they are the Arabs. They will accept Islam and become many. The white sheep are the non-Arab Persians and the like. They will accept Islam and become so many that the Arabs will not be noticed amongst them. From the 15th century writer al-Suyuti of Egypt in Tariq al-Khulafa, quoting Abu Bakr, a companion of the prophets, interpreting his dream. So what he's saying in this is basically the non-Arab Persians and people like the Turks, who are not of the same complexion, they will begin to accept Islam at such a pace that the so-called black Arabs will be not even recognizable in the future. Red, in the speech of people from Hajiz, means fair complexion, and this color is rare amongst the Arabs. This is the meaning of the saying, a red man as if he is one of the slaves. The speaker meant that his color is like that of the slaves who were captured from the Christians of Syria, Rome, and Persia. From Al-Dahabi of Damascus, Syria, in Biography of Eminent Nobles. Now here's some of the terms. White. In the past, when the Arabs describing someone as black, they meant the true meaning of the word. They didn't mean what people mean today by black. They meant a color much darker than the color that is meant today. They didn't mean a color like that of most so-called African Americans. They didn't mean a color like that of so-called Africans either. They meant a jet black complexion. You will find some people and tribes in the area called Africa in Arabia who are this color. This is what Arab writers meant in the past when they described someone as black. they didn't mean that he was non-Arab or mixed. They only meant to describe his black complexion, which was not uncommon in the Arab race. You will find many noble Arab people and tribes that were described as black. I will mention some of these noble people and tribes later in this book. When the Europeans became the dominant power, the term black took a different meaning. It took on a more comprehensive meaning. Now people use the term for people who are actually black, for those who are like brown, and for those who are, in ancient Arab terms, white. The terms brown and white also have different meanings today from the meanings that they had in the past. In the past, the term brown meant dark skin. Most of the people in the area called Africa south of the Sahara are brown. In fact, Africa is called by the Arab the brown continent. Also, most of the people in America who call themselves black Americans are in reality brown or white in ancient Arab terms. When the Arabs of the past said that a person was brown, they meant that he was dark-skinned, close to black, which is actually a dark shade of brown. Green, another term that was used by the Arabs of the past to describe the complexion of some people, and that is not understood today, is the term green. This term was used to describe people with a very dark complexion. It was used to describe people whose complexion was black in the true sense of the word. The words green and black are used interchangeably by the Arabs in the past. Al-Jahid says the Arabs call black things green. Ibn Mandur says that which is black is also called green. Most people today are unaware of the fact that green was used to describe the color of the people. Therefore, when people read about someone being described as green, they have no idea what is meant by the description. So green too is a dark complexion that would be considered black in America. The memory of the blackness of the Moors as they appeared for over 1,000 years in Europe was so persistent that most dictionaries in Europe, from the British Isles to Germany and Italy, continue to describe the word meaning the black man until the early 20th century. See J.A. Rogers' book, Nature Knows No Color Line, for these references. The phrase woolly-haired like a Moor, as used by the Roman satirist Martel, and description of Moors as black as jet, blacker than ink, black as Satan, black as a Moor, black as melted pitch, black as burnt brands, black as a cooking pot, continue to appear throughout European literature until the medieval period and become associated with things evil and diabolical or malevolent. As if the world has been turned upside down, blackness in early Arab culture, as in pre-Ptolemaic Egypt and early Dravidian India, according to Marco Polo, was revered as representative of what was archetypically good, holy, and powerful. While in European culture, even in early times, it appears to have been the exact opposite. I'm going to cover that again.
That's right.
Because Drew Ali said, according to science, the science of the Europeans, that black is basically evil. As if the world has been turned upside down, blackness in the early Arab culture, as in pre-Ptolemaic Egypt and early Dravidian India, according to Marco Polo, was revered as representative of what was archetypically good, holy, and powerful, while in European culture, even in early times, it appears to have been the exact opposite. Shakespeare, 1,000 years after Isidore of Seville in Spain spoke of the word Moore as meaning black, uses the word Negro and Moor for the same person in his Titus Andronicus. The Christian Isidore underlines the fact that Moors are so named because they are black and their blackness comes from the heat of the sun. The word Moor thus came to be used for many populations and individuals who resembled early Arabians and Berbers or Berberi, and thus it is found a surname or certain saints in European depicted as black Africans. In modern times, Peter, the Moorish assistant of Santa Claus in some European countries, is often depicted as black as ink. As the Muslim Moors in the Iberian Peninsula in North Africa began to assimilate with with other people in the later centuries of the Moorish civilization, the terms Tanny Moor, which is also Tawny Moor, and White Moor came to be utilized in some texts in England, and Moro came to refer to any relatively dark Muslim in Spain. Thus, the term Blackamoor is used in later times for Europeans themselves that resembled Africans or Africans who resembled Moors.
Yeah, now we're about to close. Okay. I just wanted to say a couple of things. Definitely you did a great job on it. But we're going to definitely pick up next week, and we're going to finish discussing this term, all of these color terms, black, red, brown, its different applications, its meanings, and then how those different things came to be about during the punitive wars and afterwards. But one thing I just want to say real quick is that I think one of the main things that people should take into consideration from this presentation is from with the information that the brother presented, that I deeply grasp the karmic debt issue that is pretty much at play, where there was various Moors degrading and demeaning other human societies, and then they got flipped around. As you can see, at the time you was explaining, black and these different terms was noted as some kind of positive term. Although we know the English term didn't exist, black, the equivalent to what that would have been, had a positive denotation to it. As the status of the Moors became subjugated, so do those terms then begin to take on, degrading or offensive terms. So I just wanted to put that out there, something that I seen. But we had a wrap, we had an end now, it's 10 o'clock. We got off to a slow start. This is the first presentation. And next week we definitely have, more visuals and more different things in place to make sure everybody is well learned and well entertained. Indeed. You guys have to close?
Indeed. We're going to work on definitely being able to have the presentation visual. You know what I'm saying? We just have to work out the kinks where the live stream, the cameras pick us up on live stream. We might even have to get a camera that's like an infrared, with an infrared addition to it, so it could basically pick it up, so we could do this presentation. But like this early presentation where I was reading wasn't very visual, so we didn't miss anything. But as we do go along, we have a lot of images to show the family that definitely would drive home many of the points that we're making. So I thank everybody for coming out. I thank y'all for your attention. Hopefully this is helping to, paint a clearer picture as to our history and putting things in perspective, you know what I'm saying? So we could clear some of the confusion and we can add on to the treasure, the wealth of our knowledge, all right? With that, I say peace.
Definitely, real quick, want to thank the elder Hakeem Bey for coming and allowing his services to actually stream it, because we definitely needed that. That was definitely a great thing. Appreciate it, elder.
Thank y'all brothers for keeping.
And also, when we use that term Moorish paradigm, that's coming straight from you. Serious about Moorish paradigm.